For decades, my life's work has been outside sales. For pretty much the last 4 decades, I would drive upwards toward 50,000 miles a year. And I always had my companions with me in the car. I had KMBR radio for sports, and I had KCBS for news and traffic. And it worked great until I got to Bakersfield, California. And that's where I would lose reception. It worked great until I'm in with an appointment and somebody really interesting is being interviewed. It worked great until the morning I woke up and came to the conclusion that I could ask better questions than the host. It was a few short years ago when podcasting started coming of age that everything opened up. Tonight after dinner, I can listen to KMBR's morning show from yesterday and get all caught up. You and I can listen to anything we want, anytime we want, anywhere we want. But wait, there is more. We can actually start our own shows. We can ask our own questions. And if we're Toastmasters, we can go to level 4 in any Pathways program and find a project that'll walk us through starting our own podcast. My friends, we are living in the golden age of communication options, and therefore we are living in the golden age of self-expression. Now, why should you be a podcast host? Well, first of all, it can help your business. Are you a plumber or an electrician? Could you do a weekly podcast on best practices for obtaining permits? Are you a restaurant owner or manager? Could you do a podcast geared for foodies? I have a financial planner who does her own podcast. As she talks about the financial trends, the healthcare trends, and all the trends that affect people, particularly as they get older and close to retirement. What is your passion? What could you do a podcast on? It's also fun. Mine started about 5 years ago when I would call Toastmasters friends of mine and just talk about the issues of the day. Just see what we could find common ground on. That's actually what the world needs more of. Different ways, creative ways where we can find common ground. The first interview I did was with a friend of mine named George. And I thought the interview went great. George thought the interview went great. But after George and I hung up, I learned that there's a learning curve with podcasts. And the first learning curve was when you record an interview on Zoom, you have to press record. I did not do that. And George was kind enough to do the interview all over again. And that one made it to prime time. Now, last year, I started a podcast called Leadership Lessons from the Negro Leagues. The Negro Leagues is where African Americans played professional baseball when they were excluded from the major leagues. I have had the honor and the privilege of talking with authors, family members of Negro League ball players, and even some Negro League ball players that are still living and thriving into their 80s and 90s. My favorite interview was with the Stearns family. Rosalind Stearns Brown, Joyce Stearns Thompson, and then Vanessa Ivy Rose. Rosalind and Joyce are the daughters of Baseball Hall of Famer Norman Turkey Stearns. And Vanessa is Joyce's daughter, Roz's niece, and she's a granddaughter of Turkey Stearns. They talked about the joy they felt when their father and grandfather was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame. And the speech that Roz and Joyce's mother gave, Nettie Mae, in honor of her late husband. I've made friends doing podcasts. I've learned a lot doing podcasts. And it's been a great way for me to spend my time. So what's ahead of us? We're going to talk about ways you can start a podcast. And hopefully we can shorten the learning curve. For several weeks, we'll do episodes on different subjects. We'll cover one aspect of podcasting. We'll talk about recording it, different ways you can record an interview, recruiting guests, coming up with a script and interview questions, getting the file, the recording, ready for editing, doing the editing itself, how to add music and sound effects, podcast hosting sites, releasing it to the public, and then building an audience. We'll release the episodes every Thursday. So please subscribe and you'll get notified each Thursday morning when the episode gets released. I encourage you to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And let's have this message go far and wide. You know, I talked about common ground earlier. Common ground's a big thing for me. And let's find that shining needle of common ground in that haystack of fear.